Hi, welcome. This is Veronica Reid. This is Old Dominion University, and this is a presentation about addiction. What's an addiction? An addiction is a compulsive behavior that takes center of the life of an addict. When somebody becomes an addict, that person becomes different and change its priorities. For instance, all relationships surrounded that addiction or that activity that the person is in love with or is hooked up with. People that used to be able to work well or enjoy hobbies, those activities and those relationships fade away. So the addiction takes total control or center of that person's life. So who can become an addict? And anybody that has a human brain can become an addict because we all experience feelings and pleasures and worries and stimulation. So anybody with a human brain can become an addict. And people develop addiction through different ways and processes. What interesting about addictions, and addictions can affect people from all social classes, from all ages, and from all races. People from all backgrounds and all religions and all professions can develop an addiction. There are different type of addictions. For instance, gambling or energy drinks or coffee, which is also a drug, could be fall in love with buying stuff, and that become the center of the life of somebody. For instance, playing lotteries or drinking alcohol. It can start as a social thing that has no big problems, but it can become one. For instance, others develop internet addiction or prescription drugs or sex addictions. There are different type of addictions. Many factors can trigger an addiction. For instance, self-awareness, how we relate to others, society, our personal values, how we esteem ourselves, how we communicate with others, how family communicate with us, our values, our purpose, our sense of goals, our mission, for example, how we relate to expectations and how expectations correlate to reality, for example. In general, how we relate to society, to family, and how we feel they relate to us. Here are some facts about religions that might impact the use of drugs or the development of addictions. Most religions allow the use of alcohol in specific occasions, but they imply self-restraining practice towards other drugs. The history of drug is very interesting. For instance, alcohol can be traced to early mankind, while cannabis can be traced to very primitive cultures. For instance, Oxycontin was produced in a pharmaceutical field. LSD, for instance, was generated by the CIA, and it was considered to be used as a chemical weapon. Many factors that can trigger addiction are, to some extent, DNA, personality, and also habits and personal factors such as how we relate to others, flexibility, experience, how we process things, how we solve conflicts, how we listen to others, and etc. And there is a big factor that's peer pressure that has a big influence. Social media also has an impact. For instance, how our heroes are portrayed, what our actors do, what people feel about drugs. And in the hippie movement, for instance, it was okay to consume drugs, while during the 50s it was okay to smoke. And many environmental factors that can trigger an addiction. For instance, poverty can have an impact, economical factors, natural disasters, and crises. When people experience traumatic events, they feel sometimes helplessness, isolation, loneliness, and trauma. And these are difficult things to overcome. Some people that experience horrible things, they feel guilty or have unanswered questions, are hurt or are ashamed. For instance, sexual assault or situations like Hurricane Katrina, 9/11, or experience a war can be extremely difficult for somebody. It doesn't mean that everybody will develop an addiction. It only means that they are at higher risk. How does the circle of addiction works? Well, people feel guilty, they have an emotional trigger, and they have a craving, and they go to rituals and they continue to use. So it's something that people develop according to their psychological needs or feelings. What about you? Maybe you have a friend that is an addict. Maybe you have a relative that's an addict. Maybe you become an addict. You are an addict or have never been around one. Maybe I am one, or maybe I know one. Whatever the situation is, it is a valid situation. What can you do? What can I do? What can we do? Well, we can do nothing and pretend that it's not a problem, or we can create awareness, for example. We can create tolerance. We can be informed. We can help others to be informed. And we can be supportive. We live in a society that values strength and individualism. So we tend to believe that problems, disasters, or things will going to happen to others, not to us. Is it good? Is it bad? Well, it is what it is, really. But when we think that things always happen to the rest and not to us, we believe that it's us versus them. Well, when we develop this idea that the world is around us and them, or me versus you, we encourage competition and we work against each other instead of missing the opportunity to work together. When we work against each other, there will always be winners and losers. For instance, when we choose our attitudes, if we decide not to stereotype others, as we don't like to be stereotyped by others, that's our choice. For example, if we are willing to examine our assumptions, what we think about ourselves and what we think about others, how we relate to others, for example. Do we like to be judged? Do we like to be limited? Do we like to be humiliated? Or how we like others to communicate with us? If we are willing to understand that mistakes are an important part of life, for example, we understand that we're all human. We have feelings. We are vulnerable. We are just not perfect. Nobody's perfect. We live in an imperfect world. And we understand that stuff happens and that there is help. If we open our mind and our hearts, we can encourage each other and respect each other and build a better society. For example, if we forgive each other, I forgive you and you forgive me. If I forgive myself and you forgive yourself. If we promote awareness, if we're willing to work together, understanding our limitations, if we forgive others, we are building a better society. And that's a decision that all of us do. We all decide what kind of person we want to be and how we relate to each other. When we understand that, we're able to communicate better and we have an understanding for recovery. And we can become a positive impact for ourselves and for others. Whether you are an addict or you know somebody that is an addict or is around somebody that is an addict, I hope you have hope and that you realize that there are plenty of people that have overcome this challenge and have done that very well, while there are many others that are willing to help and are willing to build a better society and help those that need to be listened and supported. So you and I, we always choose each day what kind of attitude we're going to have. And even if you're not an addict, we decide to become better person or better individuals, and to choose wisely each day is something that makes us who we are, human beings with a lot of hope. Thanks so much for stopping by. I hope you enjoy my presentation.